Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Time is running out. As you are listening today, we are just a few days away from episode 500 of the Jesus Changes Everything podcast. And if you have been listening in all the last few weeks, I have been reminding you all that I would really love to hear from more of you. I'm asking you essentially to send me cards on my birthday. That is, I'm asking you to, if you haven't, reach out and give us some feedback on the podcast, what you've enjoyed, why you listen, and I want to be able to share that on that 500th episode. And as I say, time is running out. So will you please give us an encouraging word? You can send an email. You can make a comment right under wherever you're listening to this. And I'm asking you for permission to share those on that 500th anniversary episode. I am also asking this. It's a good time to say, you know what? I've thought about it. I've thought about it every week. I listen to this appeal segment and I struggle, and it's time for me to pull the trigger. And you could send in a donation. It's so simple. You can do it through the mail. You can write us a check out to Dunamis Fellowship, Dunamis Fellowship, and send it to 4425 Denali Cove, Denali, Fort Wayne, Indiana, 46845. That's one way to do it. The other way, go to rcsproulJR.com and click the donate button and follow that process. It's very, very simple. I don't know if you've had this experience. Maybe most of you are too young to have had this experience. But whether it was the video store or the record store, when I would go in search of a movie or thinking about maybe I'll buy a new record today, there were always these movies and these records that almost made the cut every time I went. I'm thinking about buying, but I don't. I don't. And I never did. That can happen to us in all sorts of situations, and that may be where you are again, on either contacting us or supporting our work financially. You can make a one-time gift. You can make a monthly gift. There's all sorts of different ways to do it. But you may be thinking, almost. Now's the time. You know, I trust, maybe you don't know, but ministries typically have a very difficult time with donations during the summer. Why that is, I'm not really sure, but I've experienced it in many different ministries, and it's very real. So now would be a great time to come alongside. And if you can't, again, or don't want to, that's okay. I am not saying if you won't give, stop listening. The most important thing for us is people who are being blessed and learning from the Jesus Changes Everything podcast. But if you're in a position where you can give, we would love to be encouraged in that way and to be able to continue to do this. I had not too long ago, did an interview here live and in person for one of our Gospel at Work segments. And the fellow who came, is skilled and has a degree in essentially video production. And we talked a little bit about, hey, what would it take to make this conversion to include the option of video? And it takes investment in equipment that I frankly don't have the money to do. I'd love to do it. Of course, maybe you don't want to suffer through looking at my ugly mug every day, but again, it's just an option. You don't have to do it that way. But those are the kind of things that we're looking for financial support for and help with. Last thing I want to cover in this weekly appeal segment is to once again request your prayers. We're excited and eager and zealous to get to work in building the Shepherd's College. And this is one of those reasons, one of the key reasons why I've been praying myself so earnestly for God's wisdom and strength. And that's what I'm asking you to pray for. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. But I'm not ready to retire either. And I'm trying to create a completely new, well, not new, a unavailable model of training men for ministry in our day, and to reach out and serve people here in Fort Wayne and across the country and across the world. And I need help to get it done. I need financial support, and I need prayer. All of those things. I need encouragement. So would you think about that? It's going to be, by the way, June 18th. That's a Monday. Just a few days away. As I said, June 18th is going to be the day that we will put out our 500th episode of Jesus Changes Everything. And in that time frame, that's beginning in 2019 all the way through 2020, including all the way through COVID, and into now June, without missing a single weekday, including holidays. So please come alongside, be praying for us, give us an encouraging word, and if you're able, put some financial support behind the work that we're trying to do. Thanks so much for listening. Everybody needs encouragement. It has been my hope for all of these weeks now that we have been including a segment that we call Forever Friends. It's been my hope to encourage those who were friends to me at different times in my life, to let them know that I'm conscious of the fact that God worked in and through them, and that I look back at them as gifts from God. That's how I would want my friends to look at me, and that's how I would encourage my listeners to look at their friends from their past. Some of these friends, however, were particularly gifted at being an encouragement, and that's true of the gentleman I'd like to speak with you about today. His name is Carson Sensing. Carson Sensing. And Carson and I met at the University of Mississippi. And when we met, I was in graduate school pursuing a master's degree in English, and he was still in undergrad. One of the things that, one of the places where our lives crossed paths was at the weekly meeting of Reformed University Fellowship, which was the campus ministry on the campus of Ole Miss of the Presbyterian Church in America. And Carson was in leadership for this group, and part of what that meant was he was one of the guys strumming a guitar up there at the beginning of the meeting when we were singing our songs. I used to, in a grossly arrogant way, sit in the very back of the auditorium, and I put my feet up on the seat in front of me, and I would sit in a posture of assessment. I was judging the preaching or the teaching of the leader who was there, who, by the way, was a good guy as well. But I was not so much of a good guy. That said, Carson and I met, and we got to know each other, and he was excited to have a friend who was excited about Reformed theology. And not only that, in the same time frame, I was asked by Pastor Alan Cochet and his wife Ann, both of whom, by the way, earlier had segments in our Heroes You Never Heard Of segment. Alan was pastor of College Hill PCA Church there, and Ann is his precious wife. They had invited me to lead a Sunday school class for college students there at the church. And it was our general habit to, not surprisingly, watch R.C. Sproul videos. We would pop them in the VCR and watch and learn, and then we would open up the floor for questions, and I would try to be a help. And when we started out doing this, there was me and Miss Ann Cochet and 2 or 3 other students, and it was kind of discouraging because so many of the Ole Miss students actually attended that PCA church. Alan was a very good preacher, and it was a beautiful old church, and so there would be oftentimes, a whole sorority would show up, or a whole fraternity would show up on a given Sunday, but not very many people in the Sunday school until Carson came. And Carson came, and then after he was there, he went and just dragged and pushed and cajoled and needled people until we had, dozens and dozens of college kids there for this Sunday school class. Carson was a cheerleader. He was a person who was going out and bringing the people there while I was teaching, and he was an encouragement in our conversation. And he remained that for the rest of my life to this point. That is to say that when I first started got a board together for Highlands Ministries, I asked Carson to serve on that board, and he did. He and I we lived about 5 hours apart at that time. I should definitely not fail to mention this. Carson was also profoundly generous. The very first donor for Highlands Ministries was Carson, and Carson, his family happened to have season tickets for the Tennessee Titans there in Nashville when I lived in Western Virginia. And every time the Steelers came to town in Nashville, I could count on an invitation from Carson to go and watch the game with him. So, we grew up together. We just had so many of the same convictions together. I remember speaking at a conference in Nashville, one of the earliest conferences I ever spoke at, and Carson and his precious wife came, and again, they were just always so encouraging. But it's like so many other friends, and I want to make sure you get this. Like so many other friends, Carson's just fun. He's friendly. He's easygoing. Now, we've had arguments. We've had disagreements. But he's fun. And that really should go a long way. It's something we should aspire to in our relationships. We should hope not only that our friends can believe in us, that they can trust us, but we should hope that they enjoy us. Carson's just always had a gentle spirit, a great sense of humor. He's raised up some wonderful children. He's since moved way out west, and so it's been quite some time since I've seen him. But I'm going to make sure he gets a chance to listen in on this. I am grateful to God for this friend who has blessed me for year after year after year after year. As a friend, as a co-laborer, as a companion, as an encourager and a supporter. Carson, I hope you're doing well, and the rest of your family. I'd love to come out and have you cook one of your famous burgers for me. God bless you and your family, and may God bring us together again sometime soon. The Bible is a big book. It was written by scores of different authors over the course of thousands of years. It contains historical narrative, apocalyptic prophecy, poetry, song, law, and more. It is written in 3 different languages, and yet it remains one book. It is a unity because in all its myriad forms, it tells but one story. This is the story that we're called to preach. The greatest sermon ever preached was given in the providence of God to only 2 men. These men were walking on their way to Emmaus when the resurrected Lord walked alongside them. Without revealing his identity, we are told, and beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Luke 24:27. Sound preaching, friends, is preaching the word in context. Context, however, isn't merely the few verses before and after our text, or even the whole book from which we are preaching. Instead, Jesus is the context. We preach the text rightly and preach the whole counsel of God only when we preach Christ. The Bible, though it contains wisdom and law and beauty and in teaching us about marriage, isn't a book of tips on having a happy marriage. Though it tells us a great deal about the sinfulness of man, the grace of God, and how God is about the business of remaking us, yet it still isn't a book of systematic theology. The Bible, though it tells us about the coming of God's judgment and the promises of God's goodness to us into eternity, isn't a book of eschatology. The Bible, though it contains God's will for every situation we will ever find ourselves in, isn't a law book. The Bible is the book of Jesus. He is our husband. He is the Word. He is the returning King. He is the very law of God. The Bible, in short, has the answer to every question we could ever have. And like the little girl in Sunday school, who was asked by her teacher, "What hides nuts for the winter and has a bushy tail?" Like the girl who said, "I know it sounds like a squirrel you're talking about, but I'm going to guess Jesus." In the same way, with respect to the Bible, the right answer is always Jesus. Our sermons should have as their Alpha and Omega the Alpha and Omega. We should begin with Christ, and we should end with Christ, and we should stay with Christ all the way in between. The Apostle Paul wrote this to the church at Corinth: "For I determined not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified." 1 Corinthians 2:2. Fools that we are, we come with excellence of speech and wisdom. The Puritans, who were known for being rather austere in their worship, who sought to purify out of the church all that God had not explicitly commanded, happily had one inconsistency. Though Scripture nowhere enjoins us to do this, many of them would have engraved on their pulpits, facing not the congregation, but the pastor himself, these words, "Sir, we would see Jesus." John 12:21. They did this to remind themselves of him whom they were called to remind their congregations of. We would be wise to do the same. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.